Hello, everybody. All right, so today we're going to look at title casing a sentence from freeCodeCamp. All right, and that's going to be in the basic algorithm scripting section. And we've got a bunch of stuff to go over. So I'm going to start off here by sharing my screen and showing you some things that we have to know. All right, so one of the things that I want to talk about is concatenate. All right, concatenate is when you take two things and you can stick them together. So if you take a look down here, here is a variable that is a string, hello. And what I can do is I can take my variable hello and I can concatenate Kevin, comma, have a nice day. So what that's going to say now is hello, Kevin, have a nice day. So concatenate just adds things together, smushes things together. So that's a good one to know. So we're going to have to use that one today. Also, we're going to be taking a look at this here. And what do we have here? We've got the length, okay? So if you're looking at the string.length again, we're going to be utilizing this as well. So we have string.length. And remember, the string.length or the array.length, they work in the same way. Next, we have a char at. So if we have a string, any string, we can identify a particular character in that string. So again, this is going to work just like how we identify objects in an array, where the very first thing there is going to be the index 0, and then the next one's going to be index 1, 2, 3. So remember, it starts at 0. So therefore, the last position in a string is going to be the length minus 1. All right, so if we have the word brave, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 letters, all right, the char at, let's just say the length minus 1, if the length is 5, 5 minus 1 is 4, and the char at index 4 is actually the 5th letter. Something to keep in mind that we might need to be looking at sooner or later. We don't really need that specifically for today, but we are going to be using char at to identify a specific character, because we will be title casing or making just certain characters big or small. And then we also have our slice. Okay, slice is a little more complex. All right, it is an array method. Now, with the array method, you can either slice, okay, and it's just going to take the beginning spot here, or you can take in a second argument, which is the end. So you can either use it with 1 or 2 arguments. For example, here is an array with 1, 2, 3, 4 objects, and they've labeled it 0, 1, 2, 3 to help us identify the actual index position of that. So slice, we have a beginning and an end here at 1 and 3. All right, so what is that going to give us if we slice 1 and 3? Well, let's look here. We end up with 1, 2. So we're going to slice before 1, and we're going to slice before 3. That's important to note, by the way. The slice is where you're going to cut before, not after. So it's going to slice before the 1 index, and it's going to slice before the 3rd index. And that's how we're going to get what we need. So that's slice. Slice is just going to slice before it. If we don't identify a second parameter, it's just going to slice from that first one forward. And we're going to take a look at split. We've already used split. Split being a string method where we take a string and we can now split it and into its individual components and put it into an array. And before, I've used this example down here. Okay, hello world, how are you doing? And I can split this string by a space, so by each space. And if I want, I could take in another parameter, being 3, which is how many of these array objects am I taking in? In this case, 3. So it's going to take hello, there's a space, that's going to be my first one, world period, then a space, that's my second object, and how, space, and that's my third object. And as you can see in the example, here is the resulting array. Okay, so that's an overview of everything that we need to help us get started with this challenge. So what exactly is this challenge? I left the, I usually test these out. We'll explain all of this. So here we have something like I'm a little teapot. And right now we are looking at capital I, and then the rest of these letters are small. And what we want is we want to return a string. All right, and we want to return a string where the first letter of each word is capitalized. So, but we also have strings here where there's capitals throughout. So how logically should we handle this? Well, the way I decided to handle this was I was going to take everything, split up my sentence into an array, make everything lowercase, cut off the first letter, and then capitalize the first letter, and then add it back together using the concatenate. So that's going to be the overall methodology here. So how do we actually get this done? Well, let's kind of take a look at this and see how we can get this working. So let's start off here. We're inside of our title case, and we have one argument that we're going to pass this function. It's going to be str, and it's going to be a string. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create an array out of this argument. And in order to do that, I need to set it to the argument itself, which is str, and I can split that. And I really don't want to worry about the spaces, so I'm going to split it by these spaces, similar to the example that I showed you previously. So that right there is going to split what I have. So that's good to go. Okay. Now, before we talked about using a for loop to iterate through every object in an array, and so that's what I'm going to do here again. And remember, since we're going to be starting at the 0th position, or the 0 index of the array, my var I want to set to 0 because I want to start at the beginning, or that 0 index of that array. And then I want to iterate through every piece of that array, every piece of information, every word that's in that array, rather. And in order to do that, I want to say that I want to go through the, I want to make sure that that is less than the arr.length. So my array dot length, right? Now, what are we going to do? How are we going to increment this? I plus plus. Again, that's just adding 1 to the I. And that's going to start at the beginning of the array and iterate through until we get to the over to the end of the array, which is going to be the length. Now, if we turn this into an array, you're going to notice that you're going to have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 items in that array because we're splitting it by the space. And as we iterate through with the 0th position that's here, and then we're going to increment 1, and then we're going to be here. We're going to go through again. We're going to increment 1. Okay, we're going to be here, increment 1, increment 1. So we're going to be at 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. Then when we try to increment again, we'll be at 5. And remember, 5 is not less than the overall length, which is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 5 is not less than 5. It's actually equal to 5. So then we will exit out of that for loop. Okay, so once we've created our for loop now, we have an array to work with every word in it. So you have a little spot right here with every word in it. And now what we need to do is to figure out how to make everything lowercase, cut off the first letter, make it uppercase, and stick it back together again. So the way I'm going to do this, in order to do array methods, I'm going to create a placeholder. I'm just going to call it variable A, and that's going to be our first variable. And all I'm going to do is I'm going to set ARR I, which is whatever spot in the array. So the first time this for loop works through, it'll be at I'm, and then I plus plus go to the first position or the first index position, and then I'll be at 1, and then it'll go again to the second index position, 0, 1, 2. It'll be little, so on and so forth. So this variable A is going to change with every cycle of this for loop. now I can do stuff to my individual words themselves. Okay, that's good. So what do we need to do now? Well, now that I can identify the individual words easily with this variable a, I'm going to create a new variable. I'm just going to call it b. And what I want to do with this is I want to hold in b, all right? I want to have b just be the very first letter in uppercase, okay? I'll just make it look a little nicer. Hey. All right, so how do I do that? So I know I can apply an array method, and I can select the individual character using char at. And that's what I showed you in the beginning here. So we have here a string, and we have char at any string dot char at 0. All right, and it's going to be the very first instance in that array there. So here we go. So if we go a dot char at 0. All right, now, so what is a? Okay, a is whatever spot I am in my array as I'm iterating through. So 0 in the 0th position of the array. So here's the 0th position of the array. I'm for the first time through, and character at 0 is going to be the very first character. So it's going to be this letter I. So then b for this cycle is just going to be this letter I. If I iterate through the loop again, a will now be the first index, or a, and we're going to set that a at the 0th position, since there's only one, is going to be a anyway, and we're going to be identifying that character. Okay, so now that we've identified that character, all I want to do is I want to make it uppercase. So luckily, I can just use to uppercase. All right, and I've used that before. So to uppercase. So now I have a placeholder that is b. So that variable b now is going to take that whatever word I am in the array, and it's going to take just that first letter, and it's going to make it uppercase regardless of what it is. All right, that's good. And if you notice, we haven't messed with that variable a except to assign something different, identify that first letter and assign it to something else. But that word a is still intact, which is important. Why? Because now that that word a is still intact, I can now reassign it. And what I want to do is I want to cut off everything but that first letter. So I'm going to get rid of that first letter and keep whatever's left there. And then I can add in the capital letter here. So how do I do that? Well, I want to slice. So I can use the a dot slice. All right, so what are we doing with slice? Now remember, slice is going to, we can put in past the two parameters where it's going to start and then where it's going to end. So if I slice from this first index to the third, it's going to find the 0 first index, slice before it, and find the 0, 1, 2, 3 index, and slice before that. And what's remaining is going to be 1, 2. So now if in here, I don't want that 0th index, so I know I want to start at the first index. All right, and then where do I want to go to? I want to go all the way to the end. All right, so if I go to a dot length, what is that going to give me? Well, let's take a look at this word little as an example. It has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 letters. So the length is 6. Okay. However, this last letter E is in the 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5th index position. So if I cut off at the 6th position, which doesn't really exist, which is somewhere out here, it's going to cut off right before that, which is going to be in front of the E. So what I'm going to be left with is it's going to cut off the 0th, which is that L, and I'm going to be left with the rest of the word. So now A is just set to the word without the first letter. Awesome. However, we have to make sure some of these examples down here, they have uppercases in the rest of these words. So how do I do that? Well, the opposite of what I did with B. And so instead of to uppercase, you could probably guess what I'm going to do. To lowercase. And now I have two separate variables, one with a capital letter. So B is just the capital letter, the first letter. And I have A, which is the rest of the word in lowercase. So all I have to do now is push these two things together. So I'm going to reassign the index of my array, ARR, to the to just B plus A, and I'm going to use concat to do that. So I'm going to assign now this ARR I, okay, which is whatever word we're in specifically in that array, and I'm going to set that equal to my B dot concat A. Remember, all that does is you're going to start with something B, and I want to add, what do I want to add? I want to add in A, and that's going to give me one string. And that's all that we really need to do. So now we have an array of, well, I'll just show you what we have here. Now we have an array that is, all the words have an uppercase first letter, okay? So that works pretty good. Now, one thing that we have to remember to do is that we still have an array down here, so we have to turn this back into a string, right? So how do we do that? Well, we have to remember that our str, all right, or our array itself, we have a variable ARR that's an array. So we can just say ARR equals ARR dot join. And don't forget, we want it to be a sentence, so we want to make sure we add a space in there as well. And nothing but net. We are good to go. Perfect. Again, hopefully this was informative. If you have any questions, you could always send me a message or just ask me in person if you're here in person. Otherwise, I will see you next time.